He threw me to the ground in open court, ripped the papers from my hand, cuffed me in front of a silent judge, and spat the words, "People like you don't belong here." What he didn't know was that I was his new chief of police, and I had come not to beg, but to break the system that made men like him believe they could do this and get away with it. This shocking moment ignites a sweeping drama of justice, power, and redemption. From the humiliation of being arrested in front of a judge to dismantling an entire corrupt department, one black woman turns her pain into policy, her fury into reform, and becomes the force that brings a city to its knees. This isn't just a story about a badge. It's about what happens when the truth wears it. He slammed the door so hard it echoed across the courthouse. "Sit your ass down." He barked, his hand instinctively resting on the holster of his weapon. I hadn't even spoken. I was just standing adjusting the navy blue blazer I'd chosen so carefully that morning, the one with the gold trim that reminded me of my grandmother's Sunday church outfit. All I'd done was stand to gather my files. He stormed toward me like a freight train officer Mark Rylance. White, stocky, a buzz cut that screamed ex-military, and a scowl so permanent it looked stitched to his face. "This court doesn't need spectators like you disrupting order," he said, jabbing his finger into my chest. I blinked. "I'm not a spectator," I replied calmly. He didn't let me finish. He shoved me hard against the bench, my papers spilling like feathers into the air. People gasped. One woman cried out, but no one moved, because I was a black woman, and he was a cop. He yanked my arms behind me. Cold metal bit into my wrists. "You're resisting," he hissed. "I'm not," I cried. "I was just—" "Keep talking, and I'll make sure you're locked up for contempt." The courtroom was silent now. Not even the judge intervened. She lowered her eyes, adjusted her robe, and pretended not to see. As he dragged me toward the side exit, one of my heels snapped. I stumbled. He didn't care. "You people always think you can walk in here and act like you run the place," he muttered under his breath. You people. If only he knew who I was. But I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because I was watching. I needed to see who would stand, who would cower, and who would pretend this didn't happen. I am Chief Justice Rachel Monroe, or I will be officially in 48 hours. My appointment as the new Chief of Police of Rockwell County was announced just yesterday. The governor's press conference was all over the evening news. But clearly, Officer Mark Rylance didn't watch. Or maybe he didn't expect someone like me, someone with deep mahogany skin and natural curls pulled into a bun, to ever wear the badge of power in this building. I had come in early today in civilian clothes to observe a trial quietly before stepping into my role. I wanted to understand what was broken before I began fixing it. But now I had been cuffed, humiliated, assaulted, and not as chief of police. As a black woman, as just another you people. I sat alone in the back, holding cell still handcuffed. The silence was thick with injustice, and I remembered the first time I felt these metal cuffs. I was 16. My brother Jason had been falsely accused of shoplifting at the 7-Eleven near our home. I had shouted at the officer to stop hitting him, so they arrested me too. Said I was interfering with an investigation. I spent the night on the cold floor of a holding cell while Jason bled from his lip in the next room. That was the night I decided I would fight. Not with fists, but with law, with justice, with truth. And now, here I was, decades later, still cuffed, still fighting. 30 minutes later, a deputy entered with a clipboard. "Chief Monroe," he said hesitantly. I raised an eyebrow. "You know who I am." His face paled. "Ma'am, I just got the governor's update. There was a mistake. I'm so sorry. The judge, she's asking to see you. A mistake. They called, dragging me out, humiliating me, violating my dignity, a mistake. I walked back into the courtroom with my cuffs finally removed, my wrists sore and red. Every eye turned. Officer Rylance stood by the door, his face draining of color, as he recognized the woman he had just assaulted. "You're—" "Yes," I said, calmly stepping past him. "I'm your new boss." He tried to stammer an apology, but my gaze cut sharper than any words. I stepped up to the bench. The judge looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. "I'd like a word in chambers," I said. Immediately. Behind closed doors, the tension was suffocating. Judge Eliza Thornton, pale and flustered, offered tea. I declined. "You saw what happened," I said. She nodded. I didn't realize. You didn't need to realize anything. You saw a citizen assaulted in your courtroom, and you did nothing. It was a misunderstanding." I laughed bitterly. "That's what they always call it when it happens to someone who looks like me." She looked down. "What do you want me to do?" I leaned in. "I want your full cooperation. We're going to root out every piece of rot in this courthouse. And it starts with accountability." The next morning, the footage leaked. Someone in the courtroom had recorded it. The clip showed Rylance shoving me. The snap of the heel. The way no one moved to help. It went viral within hours. Black justice trended nationwide. Calls flooded City Hall. Emails demanded his suspension. Others demanded his badge. But I said nothing publicly. Not yet, because I knew the twist was still coming. That evening, I sat with my mother in our old apartment above the barber shop she still ran. She'd seen the video. "They think your power will make them respect you," she said softly, stirring tea. "But baby, you gotta make them respect the people who don't wear a badge, too." I nodded. "That's the plan." She reached for my hand. "You were born to lead this city, Rachel. But don't let the badge change your heart. Let it change the world." Back in my hotel room, I stood in front of the mirror. I took out the blazer, the one that now bore a small tear near the elbow. I pressed my fingers against the bruise on my wrist. Then I picked up the badge the governor had handed me just 24 hours ago. I clipped it to my chest. Tomorrow, I walk into headquarters not as a woman in handcuffs, but as chief of police and Officer Rylance. He's about to find out what real justice looks like. They say power changes people. But walking into that police headquarters on my first official day as chief, I realized power doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've been all along. And Rockwell County. It had been hiding a sickness beneath polished brass and dusty blue uniforms for far too long. The lobby fell into a hush the moment I stepped through the glass doors. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Coffee cups trembled slightly in hesitant fingers. I could hear the air conditioners hum louder than the men who were suddenly clearing their throats and avoiding my eyes. I wore the uniform today. Not because I needed it to prove who I was, but because it made them uncomfortable, and they needed to be uncomfortable. Officer Rylance stood near the front desk, his eyes widening as if he'd seen a ghost. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stepped forward. "Chief Monroe," he began. His voice was thin, practiced. "I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," I said, locking eyes with him. "You should have treated every person in that courtroom with dignity. Title or not." He flinched. I walked past him without breaking stride. That was the first lesson. The chief's office still smelled like aftershave and neglect. I scanned the room-old plaques from men who'd ruled this department like kings. Smiling faces of past police chiefs, all white, all male, stared from the photo wall. Until today, I turned to my assistant, Serena Young, sharp, a Latina with fire in her voice and steel in her spine. "Get me the disciplinary files," I said. "All of them. I want a list of complaints against every active officer in this building." She blinked. "All of them, ma'am." "Yes, start with Rylands." She nodded, on it. By noon, my inbox was overflowing. Not with congratulations, with warnings, anonymous tips, leaked text messages, whispers from brave souls who'd been waiting for someone like me to walk through that door. Watch out for internal affairs. They protect their own. Lieutenant Brackett runs the night patrol like a mafia. Check body cam gaps. There are sealed files they'll never let you see unless you know where to dig. Every message came with the same undertone. Be careful. They smile in your face. Then poison your coffee. That afternoon, I called my first closed-door command meeting. 7 senior officers sat around the table, arms crossed, eyes skeptical. Lieutenant Brackett, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and rumored to be untouchable, spoke first. "Madam Chief, with all due respect, this department doesn't need fixing. We've been serving this county for 50 years. Your presence is new." His words were sweetened with diplomacy but laced with disdain. I smiled. Corruption also served this county for 50 years. That doesn't make it right. A few men shifted in their seats. One woman, Detective Angela Rivers, the only other black person at the table, lowered her eyes. "Every officer in this building will be reviewed," I continued. "Body cams, complaints, use of force records. And those with clean records have nothing to fear. And those who don't bracket challenged. They'll be removed, no matter how long they've served." Silence. Then Captain Mendez, a younger officer with hesitant brown eyes, cleared his throat. "Permission to speak, ma'am." I nodded. There are good people in this department, but many are scared. They've seen whistleblowers disappear into desk jobs, or worse. I looked at him. That ends today. Later in my office, Detective Rivers knocked gently. "May I?" she asked. I waved her in. She closed the door softly behind her, then turned to face me. "I saw what happened in the courtroom," she said, voice low. "Rylance has been like that for years, but no one ever said anything. Not out loud." "Why not?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because we all knew what would happen if we did." I leaned forward. "And what happens now?" She met my gaze finally fully. "I'll help you. Quietly. But you have to understand, this building doesn't just need reform. It needs exorcism." Over the next 3 days, I worked like a surgeon cutting through rot. I reviewed over 90 complaints. Cross-referenced body cam footage. Met with internal whistleblowers under cover of night. Patterns began to emerge. Officer Darren Grant repeated excessive force complaints, always dismissed due to lack of evidence. Sergeant Joyce Palmer, known for manipulating reports to shield her unit. Lieutenant Brackett, accused of intimidating lower officers, reassigning those who questioned his authority. But it wasn't just individuals. It was a culture, a code of silence passed down like gospel, a worship of brotherhood over truth. And it was about to break. On Friday, I held a press conference. I stood in front of the city courthouse where it all began. Microphones aimed at my face, flashing lights reflecting off my polished badge. "I was assaulted in this building," I began. "Not as chief of police, but as a citizen. And that assault is symbolic of what too many have faced in silence." Gasps. Cameras clicked rapidly. "My administration will not tolerate racism, brutality, or corruption. We will investigate. We will hold accountable and we will rebuild. One reporter shouted, "Will Officer Rylance be fired?" I looked into the lens. There is due process, but there is also consequence. No one is above the law. Back at headquarters, Rylance confronted me. "You're making a spectacle out of me," he snapped. "You're trying to make an example." "I'm not trying," I replied. "You already made yourself one." His face burned red. "This is political." "No, this is justice." He leaned in, low and venomous. "You don't belong here." I stepped closer. "And yet, here I am. And you're under review." That night, Serena burst into my office. "You need to see this," she said, tossing a folder on my desk. It was a sealed file, uncovered by accident. Inside, an internal memo from 6 months ago. Officer Rylance had been previously disciplined for a similar assault. The victim, a black teenage girl. The file had been buried. The footage lost. I held it in my hands. My chest tightened. He had done this before, and someone had protected him. I took the file, walked to the evidence room, and requested archived footage. Most of it was gone, but fragments remained. Enough to see his hand on the girl's neck. Enough to see the same hate. I printed stills, attached the memo, built the case, and then I did what he never expected. I called a special session with the city board. Not to talk, to act. The next morning, I entered the briefing room. Every officer stood. Tension thick as concrete. I held up the memo. "Officer Rylance, you are hereby suspended, pending investigation for repeated use of force and violation of civil rights," I said clearly. Murmurs rippled, a few gasps. Rylance stood frozen. "You can't do this," he barked. I just did. 2 internal affairs officers escorted him out. For the first time, the badge trembled in the hands of the abuser, not the abused. That night I didn't sleep, not because I feared backlash, but because I finally saw it, the first crack in the wall. Tomorrow we swing the hammer. They didn't riot in the streets. They didn't throw bricks through windows. But the storm I unleashed didn't come with sirens. It came with whispers behind closed doors, inboxes suddenly deleted, and hallway glances that held more venom than a rattlesnake's bite. And I knew I'd struck a nerve. The morning after Rylance's suspension, the department cafeteria emptied the moment I walked in. Chairs scraped back, conversations died, and the smell of scorched eggs clung to the silence. Good. Let them stew in the truth. But it was Serena who gave me the first clue that something deeper was happening. "They're scrubbing files," she said quietly as we walked into my office. "Someone is going through the archives, digital and physical. Things are disappearing." "Who?" I asked. She hesitated. "Brackett. He has access, but he's not doing it alone." I didn't flinch. Then we dig faster. We set up an encrypted back channel with the city IT department, only 2 trusted techs who owed me from my internal affairs days. That night we recovered fragments, deleted emails, altered timestamps, disciplinary complaints reworded, redacted, refiled. A name kept surfacing. Project Sentinel, not a real initiative. A code name. Buried in footnotes, it showed up in traffic stops, late-night arrests, even surveillance requests almost always tied to people of color. "This isn't just negligence," Serena whispered, scrolling through a map of affected neighborhoods. "This is targeted." I stared at the screen. The pattern was clear. They weren't just protecting each other. They were hunting us. The next morning, I brought in Angela Rivers. She closed the door, arms folded. "I've been waiting for you to ask." "You know Sentinel?" I asked. Her jaw clenched. I lived it. She told me about a neighborhood in the East End, 90% black, low income, rarely policed unless it was with aggression. No one called it Sentinel out loud, she said. But we knew. We were told to increase presence, which meant arrests. We were told to watch for patterns, which meant profiling. If you didn't comply, you were reassigned, or buried. She nodded. Brackett was the architect. But the judge, she signed the surveillance warrants, always under the same pretense, public disorder. It was more than a bad apple. It was a whole orchard. That afternoon, I called the mayor. He was jittery, voice shaking with the kind of fear that comes from realizing your city is sitting on a powder keg. "You can't go public yet, Rachel," he pleaded. "You'll cause chaos." "Chaos?" I asked, my voice steel. "You're worried about chaos. You should have been worried when children were handcuffed outside grocery stores. You should have been worried when innocent men had their doors kicked in at 2 a.m. without cause." "I need time," he said. "Let me get ahead of this." "No," I said coldly. "You had time. Now it's mine." I hung up. That night the first death threat came. A plain white envelope slid under my hotel door. Inside, a photo of me in uniform, a red X drawn across my face. No note. Just silence. I locked the door, checked my pistol, called no one. Because if they thought fear would make me back down, they'd clearly never met my grandmother, the woman who once stood between our home and a burning cross with nothing but a broomstick and the Lord's Prayer. Fear was a familiar smell. And I'd learned how to breathe through it. The next day, I gathered my inner circle, Serena, Detective Rivers, Captain Mendez, and 2 civilian oversight advisors from the governor's task force. We laid it all out. Sentinel, the cover-ups, the redacted files, the forged warrants. "Why hasn't anyone gone to the press?" Mendez asked. "Because stories without proof become conspiracies," I said. "We need undeniable evidence." Serena nodded. "We need a leak." A leak, Rivers frowned. "Yes," I said slowly. "A controlled one. Let the public see the first crack." So we gave it to a journalist who still believed in truth, Mara Fields, a young black woman working at the city's smallest paper, but known for never selling out. We met her at a diner at 2 a.m., a manila envelope between us. She opened it, jaw tightening. "Is this what I think it is? Don't name names," I warned. "Not yet. But expose the pattern. Let people connect the dots." She nodded. "I got you, Chief." By sunrise, the city was on fire. Not literal flames, but righteous rage. Project Sentinel citizens, profiled under secret police initiative. The headline flashed across phones, news tickers, morning talk shows. The judge tried to deny it. Brackett gave no comment. But the court of public opinion doesn't wait for permission. Protests broke out. Peaceful, furious. Choirs in front of City Hall. Mothers holding photos of sons they lost to wrongful arrests. Teachers. Pastors. Veterans. I stood at my office window and watched the people rise. They weren't angry because I exposed corruption. They were angry because they already knew. They were just waiting for someone to confirm it wasn't in their heads. 2 days later, the backlash hit. City Council called an emergency meeting. I sat at the center of a long, polished table, eyes boring into mine from every direction. Councilman Dobbs, white, sharp-jawed, combed-over, leaned forward. "You've created a mess, Chief Monroe," he said. "Do you understand the tension you've stirred?" I stared at him. "Do you understand the pain your silence has caused for years?" "This isn't about race," he snapped. I leaned in. "Everything is about race when race is used as a weapon." The chamber went quiet. Finally, Councilwoman Patrice Nguyen, Vietnamese-American, normally reserved, spoke. "I've lived in this city my whole life," she said. "And for the first time, someone's not pretending everything is fine." I stand with Chief Monroe. Others followed. 4-3. Just enough to keep me in position, but barely. That night I returned to my hotel. Another envelope, but this one was different. Inside a USB drive. No name, just a note. If you want to end it, this is where you start. I plugged it in. My heart stopped. Video files, dozens. Body cam footage. A basement I didn't recognize. Officers. Laughing. A man handcuffed. Bloody. Date stamped. Time stamped. And at the center of it all, Lieutenant Brackett. For a moment I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just profiling. It was torture. Covered up. Hidden. Sanitized for years. I sank into the chair, the weight of it pressing on my chest. This was the evidence. The undeniable proof. But releasing it meant war. Not just against officers, but against judges, councilmen, maybe even the governor. I picked up the phone. Serena, I said. Yes, Chief, call the Justice Department. Tell them we have a civil rights case. And it starts now, because the walls aren't just crumbling, they're about to fall. And when they do, no one hiding behind them will be spared. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. No fear had come and gone like an unwelcome visitor. What I felt now was rage, a sharp, silent fury so cold it kept my blood still. The kind of rage that doesn't scream. It plans. The USB drive lay on my desk like a bomb. And, in a way, it was. Inside it lived the truth. Undeniable, unforgivable, unredacted. At 6:12 a.m., I was already dressed in full uniform badge-polished boots, tight heart steady. I stared at my reflection. I didn't look like a woman about to declare war, but I was. Are you absolutely sure about this? Serena asked, her voice tight as we stood in the briefing room. Once you release that footage, it's not just Brackett. It's the whole system. I'm not trying to protect the system, I said. I'm trying to break the part that's killing us. Angela Rivers arrived, followed by Captain Mendez. I could see it in their faces, fatigue, fear, but something else too. Resolve. I inserted the USB into the projector. The screen flickered. The room dimmed. And then the truth came alive. The first video was from 11 months ago. A black teen, barely 17, cuffed to a chair. Lieutenant Brackett stood in front of him, arms crossed, face blank. You think you're tough, he said. You ain't nothing but a statistic waiting to happen. He slapped the kid. No provocation, no resistance, just cruelty. The others in the room laughed. No one stopped him. The second video was worse. A woman, middle-aged Latina, bleeding from the mouth. You fell, Brackett said. I didn't fall, she sobbed. The feed cut. By the fifth video, Serena turned away. Mendez swore under his breath. I stood still, frozen, but not with shock, with focus. I want these streamed, I said. We go live at noon. Angela blinked. You mean public? Yes, I want every channel, every station. They won't bury this. Not anymore. By 11:59 we had a secure Stream 3 vetted journalists and a warning to the DOJ. At noon sharp the screen went black. Then a title card appeared. This is what they hid. Within 30 minutes chaos. Phones rang nonstop. News vans clogged the courthouse street. Civil rights attorneys called. Senators tweeted. Lieutenant Brackett vanished. His phone off. House empty. Badge missing. I issued a warrant through state channels. He runs. I told the team he confirms his guilt. And then the police union called. A man named Crawford Gray, suit gray heart. You've overstepped, he said. I haven't even begun, I replied. You're dismantling a department. No, I said. I'm cleansing it. His voice turned sharp. You're alone, Monroe. The council is turning. You're making enemies. I smiled. Good. means I'm hitting the right targets. That night the city felt different. Protesters filled the park across from HQ, but they weren't angry. They were singing gospel, old resistance songs. A grandmother held a candle in one hand, her other around a boy holding a sign. My life matters now. I watched from my window. For the first time I felt it not victory, but hope. But hope always draws fire. At 3 a.m. my phone rang. Rivers's voice, tight, panicked. There's been an explosion. The evidence room, gone. Arson, accelerant traces everywhere. Everything, physical files, backups, sealed, reports incinerated. But not the cloud, not the live stream. They'd underestimated me, and that's when I got the message. Another envelope. No name, no return address. Inside, a single sentence written in red ink. Stop digging, or we bury you next. No signature. Just a thumbprint at the bottom, black and smudged. I held it for a long time, then fed it to the shredder. The next morning, I stood before City Council. Packed house, reporters in every corner. Councilman Dobbs, smug as ever, tried to reclaim the floor. Chief Monroe has endangered this city. I raised my hand. No. This city was endangered long before I wore this badge. And I'm not here to argue. I'm here to deliver justice. I showed them the clip of Brackett from the basement. A teenage boy bleeding. Silent. Gasps, cries, someone cursed. I turned to the council. You can remove me if you want. But no. The truth is already out. And the people, they're not afraid of you anymore. They didn't vote me out. Because they were afraid of what would happen if they did. Because this time the people were watching, and this time they wouldn't look away. I walked back to my office. Serena was waiting. We found Brackett, she said. My heart slowed. Where? She smiled grimly. Mexico. Trying to board a flight with a fake ID. They got him, I breathed. Deeply. Not in relief, but in readiness. Because bringing him down wasn't the end. It was just the next step. That night I visited my childhood street. The same cracked sidewalks. The same porch lights flickering. Kids rode bikes in circles. A woman swept her stoop. They stared as I walked up uniform, glowing in the amber haze. An old man approached me. You really are her, he said. The girl who used to carry her brother's books home. The one who said she'd clean up this city. I nodded, still trying. He smiled. Well, you're not alone anymore. And I knew then, whatever came next, I was ready. Because the footage was out. The fire was lit, and the people were rising. They used to run this city from the shadows. Men in polished shoes, and women with sealed lips. They held gavels like hammers and wore badges like shields, protecting each other like a secret society, loyal not to justice but to their own power. But now the walls they built were crumbling, and I had a sledgehammer in each hand. The morning after Brackett's arrest, the headlines were unavoidable. Fugitive lieutenant captured. At Border Project, Sentinel officially exposed. Police Chief Monroe declares war on corruption. DOJ launches civil rights investigation into Rockwell PD. And just like that, the city stopped pretending. At headquarters, I walked through the metal detectors alone. No security escort. No entourage. But I wasn't alone. Every step I took echoed with the footsteps of those who came before, who'd fought this fight and lost. Who whispered in classrooms, cried in back seats of patrol cars, who bled on sidewalks with no one to record it. Today, I walked for them. Inside, Captain Mendez waited by my door, his jaw tight. We've got a problem. Of course we did. Dobbs is calling for a special council session, he said. They're trying to suspend your authority while the DOJ investigation runs. I didn't blink. Let him. It's desperation. But Serena's voice cut in like ice. It's not just political anymore. She handed me a folder. Inside photos. Me, my mother, Angela Rivers, Mendez, even Serena. Surveillance, Serena said softly. Unauthorized. Someone's watching us. So the old guard hadn't just fallen. It was fighting tooth and nail on the way down. I called a meeting in the war room. This time, no suits. No small talk. Just the truth. Angela laid it out. Brackett wasn't acting alone. The files we found all signed off by Judge Eliza Thornton. I looked at the projection screen, her signature in smooth cursive next to every illegal warrant. Captain Mendez added, and Dobbs. He's been funneling campaign funds through shell companies linked to private prison contracts. Serena dropped another bomb. Half of the deleted footage came from a single IP address, Internal Affairs. It was worse than we thought. This wasn't just bad policing. This was an organized network of systemic oppression, legal on paper, criminal in spirit. And we were going to burn it down. The DOJ arrived the next day. 3 agents, all suits, no smiles. But one of them, Agent Keisha Patel, pulled me aside. You've got more support than you think, she whispered. Higher up, quietly, but real. I nodded. We'll need it. The special counsel session was standing room only. I wore my dress blues. No apologies. No trembling. Dobbs stood first. We can't allow this chaos to continue, he declared. The city is unstable. Public confidence is eroding. I stepped forward. Confidence eroded long before I wore this badge. What you're seeing now is the infection coming to the surface. Someone in the audience clapped. Then another. Dobbs flushed red. You are emotionally compromised, Chief Monroe. You're acting out of vengeance. I smiled. No, I'm acting out of history. I'm acting for every black child who was dragged off a street corner without cause. For every mother who couldn't afford bail. For every man who never made it home. The mayor cleared his throat. The council must vote. And one by one the hands went up. 4 against, 5 for. My authority remained intact. Barely. But barely is still a win. Afterward, I walked out into a sea of citizens, mothers, workers, students. An older man held up a sign. You're fighting for us. I nodded at him. No, I said softly. We're fighting together now. But we weren't done. That night, I filed official misconduct charges against Judge Thornton. The next morning, the bailiffs escorted her from the bench. A woman in pearls, once untouchable, now just another suspect. And when the news aired, I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just whispered next. With the dominoes falling, the city began to stir in a way I'd never seen. Officers came forward, young, scared, trembling, but ready to speak. A rookie named Jamie Price confessed that he'd been ordered to plant evidence once. He refused. Got transferred to records. A dispatcher revealed that certain 911 calls from black neighborhoods were deprioritized. Every testimony was a knife in the side of the old machine, and I sharpened every single one. But there was still one final gatekeeper, the police union, Crawford. He invited me to a meeting private off the record downtown. I went, alone. He poured whiskey like we were old friends. I'm not your enemy, he said smoothly. I just want to protect my officers. Then protect the right ones, I said. He smirked. You think you've changed things. But when the cameras are gone, so are you. They'll bury you in paperwork. Wear you down. I leaned forward. You know what the difference is between your kind of power and mine. He blinked. Yours is borrowed. Mine was earned. Then I stood. Enjoy your drink. This city's under new leadership now. 2 days later, the union released a statement supporting my reforms, not because they believed in them, but because they feared what would happen if they didn't. With Brackett extradited, Judge Thornton indicted, and the DOJ embedding permanent oversight, Rockwell began to breathe again, slowly, painfully, but breathed nonetheless. At the next community town hall, a teenage boy approached me. He was lanky, nervous, holding a notebook. "Chief Monroe," he said, "I watched your press conference with my mom. I want to be a lawyer now." I smiled. "Good. We need fighters like you." He looked up. "Do you think we'll ever be safe?" I didn't lie. "I think we'll never stop fighting until we are. But I promise you this, we're not going backward." Later that night, I sat alone in my office. Photos of the fallen officers were gone. I replaced them with framed letters, handwritten notes from citizens, from survivors, from kids. Real heroes, the real legacy. And as the city slept outside, I made peace with the truth. Justice is not an ending. It's a beginning, a promise you remake every day. They said the badge would change me. But what they didn't realize was I didn't put on the badge to become someone else. I put it on so the system couldn't ignore someone like me anymore. Because truth, when it finally wears a badge, doesn't just speak. It commands. It had been 3 weeks since Brackett was dragged back across the border in shackles. 2 since Judge Thornton was indicted. And only 5 days since the police union caved to pressure and agreed to a full audit of every disciplinary file from the last 10 years. But something deeper had shifted. Something I couldn't yet see, but could feel. "I don't recognize half these faces anymore," Angela Rivers said as we walked the halls of headquarters. Some of the old ones, Brady Pollock Hines, they resigned quietly. No press, no drama. "Good," I said. "I don't need a show. I need a clean house." "But they're scared," she added. "Even the good ones." I stopped walking. "They should be," I said. Not because we're punishing honesty, but because for too long we rewarded silence. Later that day, I sat with a mother named Lucille Chambers in my office. Her son Aaron had been arrested 3 years ago for resisting during a traffic stop. He never walked again after that night. "I've written letters for years," she said, voice-breaking, "to judges, mayors, even your predecessor. I never got an answer." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You have one now," I said. "We're reopening his case. We'll find the officers responsible." Tears welled up in her eyes, and I knew this job wasn't just about policies. It was about faces, names, stories, people. That night I received an anonymous text. Blocked number. 1 sentence. "They're going after Angela next. Check her personnel file." My blood turned cold. I rushed to the HR archives and pulled Detective Rivers' file. Inside, someone had added a complaint. Recently. Fabricated. It accused her of tampering with evidence dated just 3 days after Brackett's arrest. A desperate smear campaign. I stormed into IA, slammed the file on the table. "This isn't an investigation," I growled. "It's retaliation." They stammered. One of them, a young man named Floyd, wouldn't meet my eyes. "You signed this," I said. He whispered, "Brackett told us to write it up a month ago." "Just in case." "Rescind it," I ordered. "Now. And if any of you try this again, I'll name names publicly." I told Angela everything. She didn't flinch. "They're just mad you turned the lights on," she said. "Roaches always scatter." I laughed. "Still, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to wear a target because of me." She looked at me fiercely. "Rachel, I'm not wearing a target because of you. I'm standing tall because of you." Meanwhile, the Department of Justice had moved into Phase 2 of their investigation, interviewing officers under oath. Some cracked. Some confessed. and one exposed something I hadn't expected. Officer Jamie Price, rookie quiet, barely 24, sat down with federal agents and described something he called the Friday Files. "What's that?" I asked Serena when she read me the transcript. She paled. "Every Friday, a senior officer would compile a list," she said slowly, "of suspect citizens. Always black or brown. They'd make rounds in certain neighborhoods. High citation quotas. Stops. Arrests. I felt nausea rising in my chest. It was targeted policing dressed up as routine. Hunting season, disguised as strategy. I called a press conference. Again, but this time I brought Jamie Price with me. He stood beside me, trembling, but steady. This young man, I said, was asked to participate in a system of racial profiling. He refused, and now he's risking his job to tell the truth. I turned to the cameras. We will be releasing the full list of Friday Files. Every citizen targeted. Every arrest record. And we will begin the process of expungement and reparation." The next day the city erupted again. But this time it wasn't outrage. It was relief. I walked into a community center where families lined up not to protest, but to apply for expungement. A man in his 50s hugged me and sobbed. "I lost my job because of one of those files," he cried. "You gave me my name back." At headquarters, something began to shift. For the first time, officers started nodding at me in the hallway. One, a white patrolman I didn't know, saluted quietly as I passed. Another left a sticky note on my door. "My wife watched your speech. She made me watch it again. Thank you." Not all were with me, but enough were waking up. I visited Brackett in county lockup the following week. He was thinner, grayer, but no less smug. "Why are you here?" he sneered. To gloat. I leaned in, calm and cold. "No, to tell you that we've erased everything you built." He laughed. "You think people change. You think they'll remember you after you leave." I smiled. "No, but they'll remember the truth, and once you let truth in, it never leaves quietly." As I walked out of the jail, I thought of my grandmother again, the one who'd marched in Selma, who kept a photo of Dr. King on her wall, who told me once after I was stopped for driving while black, "Baby, wear the world like armor, and when they try to take it off, you stand naked in truth." That's the real weapon. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. The city council, under pressure from voters, approved new reforms. Civilian Oversight Board with subpoena power, mandatory body cam audits, community representation in academy hiring panels, mental health crisis teams on patrol. Change. Not perfect, but powerful. That weekend, I returned to the same courtroom where Rylance first cuffed me in front of a judge who refused to look up. Now I stood at the bench, not as a defendant, but as chief of police. I addressed a new graduating class of cadets. "All races, all stories. Remember this," I said. "Your badge is not your power. Your uniform is not your shield. Your greatest weapon is the courage to speak when others are silent." I paused. "Be the officer you needed when you were a child. And never, ever forget truth wears a badge now. And so do you. They used to call me angry. Now they call me chief. But I never chased a title. I chased the kind of justice that knocks on every door that knows your name, that doesn't just sit in a courtroom. It walks your block, eats at your table, defends you, even when no one's watching. And now, for the first time in Rockwell history, justice was wearing skin like mine. The day started with sun. The kind of sun that cuts through the dust in old neighborhoods, that makes the sidewalks steam, that lights up murals of men and women long gone. I walked those streets in full uniform, not for show, not for power, but for presence. People came out of their houses. A little girl ran up to me with a pink crayon drawing of me in a blue uniform. She had scribbled above it, "You make me brave." I knelt and took it from her gently. "No," I said. "You were already brave. You just needed to see someone else be." Later at headquarters, I received the final DOJ report. It was brutal, thorough. The Rockwell Police Department was officially deemed complicit in decades of systemic abuse, but it also praised the last 90 days, named reforms, highlighted community healing, recognized what we'd done. I closed the file and exhaled. Not relief, responsibility. Captain Mendez knocked on my door. "They want you to speak at the state summit next week," he said. Law enforcement from across the region. Even the governor. I raised an eyebrow. "You think they're ready for me?" He grinned. "I think they don't have a choice." The truth was, I didn't need a summit. I needed a street corner, a community center, a school gymnasium. That's where this fight lived. Not in ballrooms. But I agreed to go. Because if power was going to open the door, I'd walk through and hold it open for the next Rachel Monroe. Angela Rivers met me at the community board meeting that evening. She looked tired, but light. "It feels different," she said. "It is." She handed me a stack of letters, handwritten, folded raw. One from a teenager arrested for stealing food to feed his siblings. His case was dropped. Another from an officer who resigned and then returned because he believed in the new department. One more from a woman whose brother was killed by police 5 years ago. She didn't ask for revenge, only peace. In those pages, I saw it. We weren't just fixing policies. We were healing a wound. The next day, the governor called. He offered me a new role, a statewide oversight director. Bigger budget, broader reach, more authority. It was flattering, powerful, but I said no, because Rockwell wasn't done yet, because real change needs roots, not just wings, and my roots were here. They held a parade the next Saturday, not for me, for the movement, for the truth, for the people. No banners of my face. Just families holding signs "Truth Matters." Protect us all. Our city. Our voice. A marching band played. Kids waved flags. Even Rylance's former partner came. Quietly. Alone. He looked at me from across the crowd, then nodded. Once, it wasn't approval. It was accountability. And I nodded back. By mid-afternoon, I returned to the precinct. The murals in the hallway were new. Gone were the old plaques of retired officers who had closed their eyes when it mattered. In their place, a portrait of Lucille Chambers and her son smiling under a sunrise. A wall of names of those wrongfully arrested now cleared. A quote from Angela Silence is complicity. Courage is community. I entered the training room where the next class of cadets was waiting. "Tell me why you're here," I asked. One stood up. A tall, soft-spoken white man, maybe 22. He said, "I used to think policing meant control, but now I think it means service." I nodded. "You're right. And service means listening more than commanding." Another cadet, a young black woman, added, "My brother was profiled. I want to protect kids like him." I smiled. "Then you're in the right place. But it won't be easy." I paused. Truth costs, but lies cost more. That night, I stood on the rooftop of HQ. The city lights below. The courthouse lit in blue, and the flag on top waving not in pride, but in persistence. I thought of everything. The courtroom, the cuffs, the threats, the basement videos, Brackett's face, my mother's hands as she held mine, the little girl with the crayon, and I whispered to the wind, "We are not our pain. We are what we build after." I turned back toward the stairs. Behind me, a mural covered the far wall, me not alone, but standing among dozens of silhouettes. Black, brown, white, uniformed, civilian, hand in hand. Beneath it in bold, "The People's Chief," because titles come and go, but truth stays. And now in this city, truth wears a badge, and she answers to no one but the people. In a world where silence protects the powerful, and the law is often twisted against the very people it was meant to serve, one woman stood up not for glory, but for truth. Chief Rachel Monroe didn't fight to be feared. She fought to be heard, and in doing so she made sure others would never again be silenced. The meaning of this story isn't just about justice, it's about transformation. It's about how pain can become purpose, how courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it wears a uniform and walks back into the courtroom where it was once humiliated. Because true power is not found in a badge or a gavel or a title. True power is found in standing for what's right when standing alone. If this story moved you, if it made you think, cry, or feel just a little more brave, drop a comment below. Tell us your story, your truth. We're listening. Like this video if you believe truth still matters. Share this story if you believe silence is no longer an option. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and real stories that echo long after the screen fades to black. Together, we don't just witness justice, we demand it. You are not alone. This is your channel, your voice, your fight.